Hey, Kira, how you doing?
Hey, good. How are you, Armando?
Doing good. Thank you for joining us on the show. And you have some exciting news. But before we get into that for our viewers, tell us a little about yourself. How you got into the wine, and let's go there.
Right now I'm the winemaker for Oliva Brion and the owner, and soon to be owner and winemaker for a new brand called Cantadora, which I'm really excited about. And I started in wine about 12 years ago now. That was kind of my first time I really wine caught my attention when I was working in finance. I got to value a couple of wineries and just thought it was a neat industry to learn more about. Went up to Napa, met a winemaker, and just started to make it my eccentric weekend hobby, coming up and learning about wine and trying to make wine. And at that point in your career, you're only qualified to wash barrels or wash bins or, use a hose. So just dragging hoses, learning about wine. And it took a couple of years before I quit my job in San Francisco to come work in wine full time. And then I started to hop around and take a bunch of chemistry classes that I hadn't taken with my business degree and microbiology classes, and hop around harvest from Napa and Australia. And then I found a home in the Napa Valley for 4 years at Alpha Omega up in Rutherford. And then I left in 19 to run Oliva Brion full time. So it's been quite a journey.
So real quick, from when you were interested in it, left finance, worked, and launched your first, company. How long was that time frame?
So the first commercial wine I started to make was in 2016.
Well, how long?
So
Yeah.
I started to get interested in wine in 2010. My first wine I made in my garage was in 2013. So, I mean, you always learn the most with doing it, right?
Yeah.
So you can work for someone else, but doing it, you really learn the most. So I started right away making my own wine, which you should absolutely do if you're interested in doing it. And I made a half barrel. I made about 13 cases for my wedding in 2015. I was working for the
That's a lot of pressure for your wedding, because what if the wine sucked?
well, I would have bought it if I messed it up, but I I pulled it out. I ended up getting, it's kind of a fun story. I ended up getting about 400 pounds of Petit Verdot from Napa, from a vineyard that they're, most grapes are under contract. Someone has a contract for that row or block to buy them. And there was an area in that vineyard with a big tree that created a lot of shade over half of 2 rows. And when there's a lot of shade, those grapes have to be picked separately, but it's very expensive to bring a crew out and pick grapes a second time, especially when you only own a portion of the block. So long story short, sometimes grapes just get left on the vine, and at the end of the season, they just get dropped, become literal bird seeds. So I knew the vineyard manager because he was one of the guys that worked with us, the prisoner, and he knew I was looking for some grapes kind of into the season. 2013 was a really ideal growing season for the Napa Valley. We had this really long, warm growing season without any rain. And so the grapes just sat there and slowly ripened, and I got to pick my Petit Verdot from Napa, which funnily enough is the only wine I've actually made from Napa grapes.
Yeah,
They're
cool.
usually too expensive, but I got those for free for my wedding. And I made a Petit Verdot blend for my wedding in 15, and it was great. And it was just in my garage, and I got to learn a lot about, right away after only, a couple of harvests, really making all the choices for myself.
Yeah.
It really cements what you're doing.
No,
So.
and shout out to Gabby for connecting us, because she brought the Cantadora wine before you were launching. I thought the Tempranillo was so delicious, and then I got to connect with you and try your other wines. I still drink, and I got to pick up some more. So shout out to Gabby. But
Tempranillo, not to interrupt, but the Tempranillo that you had was the first commercial red I made.
oh,
So
that's
that
awesome.
was the first wine to be sold commercially.
Well, there you go. So
Yeah.
I love your passion. I love how you are a student of the game, and then you launched your business. I think that a lot of people should be inspired by creating that profession out of their passion, right? So what has been some of the challenges you've overcome as you're growing your business?
I think this is a really highly regulated business.
Yes.
And there's a couple things that are difficult. One is where to make product. That has been hard because it's very expensive to find a facility to make your wine. And they make it very expensive for you to make it in very small quantities. So it's much more expensive to make wine in small quantities than large quantities on like a per gallon basis. So I had to perhaps overcommit myself in terms of grape contracts and space from the get-go. So it was just taking on a huge amount of risk really early on in my career. In retrospect, it seems insane.
Yeah.
And so, and I'm glad I started it because now I am where I am, which is in a better place than, maybe 8 years ago. But it was kind of a crazy choice to make. But I think, when I listen to podcasts and I listen to How I Built That, I love that podcast. A lot of, I think, entrepreneurs feel that way. Certainly in retrospect, you're like, wow, I was so crazy. Why was I so crazy? And you just kind of take those leaps, and a lot of businesses fail. I've only been around since 16, who's to say I'm a success yet, but I run into challenges every year. Right now I was running into challenges just today on, filing different paperwork, and I had to call the TTB and get information from them and contact my compliance officer. And now I have a framework of people that I can turn to. But at the start, I really constantly felt like, confused, and the learning curve was really steep.
It's interesting because you got into wine wanting to be a winemaker.
Mm-hmm.
And then at some point you said, I also am building a business. Where did you go for business knowledge? Because we know you worked at different wineries to get some experience, but where did you go to say, I have to start learning how to start the company?
Well, so I have a degree in finance. That's my background. I loved economics in college, and the money-making side of economics is finance. So I went and I worked in equity research, and I worked in investment banking. And then to kind of parlay into wine, I worked at a big wine conglomerate, Constellation, in San Francisco on their business analytics team. So really the business side of wine often feels more natural to me. The winemaking I've been doing longer at this point. I have my business degree, but the winemaking I've been doing for 10 years.
Yeah.
But I really fall back on that initial education. I really do. I do all of my own books. I keep track of every SKU I make, my profit and losses on each of those SKUs, my margins. When I go into wholesale meetings now, it's harder to write me off because I can talk in their lingo. I know exactly what they're talking about. I can quote my COGS, I can quote my operating costs. And I know what to expect in terms of their margin needs. And so I can really handle my own in terms of selling the product and understanding all of the costs that flow into it. And that's huge. That's something that a lot of people passionate about wine don't necessarily get to start with.
So you would tell a Kira 20 years ago, when she had that initial passion for wine, is, understand the, wine process, but also look into, the business part of it, right? The access to capital, all that, right? You start kind of a balanced way, because most start like, let me go cook the best dish. Let me create menus. And they're not thinking, okay, like, let's incorporate ourselves and let's create a target audience. What's the marketing plan? What's the brand? Because it doesn't matter how good I cook. If I don't have a brand to grow, then, just same thing applies to wine. Would you agree?
Oh yeah. I think that, I think there's a lot of, I was telling this to a friend of mine the other day, I think there's a lot of really good, talented winemakers. I think the difference between a great winemaker and a great wine business is, perseverance and organization and, understanding the storytelling aspects of it and how to connect with your consumers, because wine is the most diverse consumer segment that you're making regular decisions about. So if you go into a grocery store, think about how many toothpaste brands you have to choose from, And you probably have more allegiance to your toothpaste than you do to whatever bottle of wine you're going to buy that night. I mean, you go into a wine wine aisle at a grocery store, nevertheless a wine store that's much more fragmented, try to pick a bottle of wine you like, it's overwhelming. And think about the producers that are trying to create some market share on the shelf. It's quite a challenge.
Yeah.
So, I think that I'm drawn to wine like a lot of people because it's this kind of really ancient, mystical beverage that, we're honestly still learning a lot about how it's formulated and, how it comes together and sort of the microbiology of it. And that's fascinating. I think some great career advice that I had gotten at some point was to follow your curiosity, not follow your passion necessarily, because passion kind of flames out. Whereas if it's something that you're constantly curious about, you're always going to be challenging yourself to get better at it. And that's something that's easy to do for me with wine. It's just, I get caught in all these different little segments of wine. Like I can start learning about, this region of wine or this varietal or this weather climate for wine or this type of farming. And every year I kind of set new intentions on the topics that I want to discover in this industry. And it helps to kind of keep my passion alive too.
No, 100%. Great dialogue. Let's tap into Cantadora. Talk to us about the inspiration behind that. What kind of style you're going to be creating, what kind of varietals we can buy. Talk to us about that.
So Cantadora is kind of my love language to everything that I have enjoyed about each industry I've been in leading up to this. So when I was doing my taxes, funnily enough, at the beginning of last year, I was looking at the returns and the hit from 2020, and I was thinking, oh gosh, it's going to be so much longer before I pay myself. Like most entrepreneurs, all of my money goes back into the business at this point. I don't take a paycheck. So I had this in mind of when I could start paying myself, and I had to move that bar back. So I said to myself, I really need to find a way to get more kind of intrinsic value out of my business. I have to kind of change the way I'm compensated. And to do that, I really want to engage more with the parts of my life that I've enjoyed the most. And so I thought back to when I was in college, I ran Women in Business. I was at University of Washington, and I was president of Women in Business. And I would go out as an evangelist of the community and find different women to come in and talk to us about their careers and about their businesses. And we started a scholarship fund, and it was just such an amazing experience working with this really diverse cast of characters and learning from really talented women. And I was so inspired that was where, kind of my inspiration for Cantadora came from, is how do I bring more of that experience into wine? How do I, what did I love about that was just, getting to interact with all of these different talented women and really, pushing them up, highlighting their achievements as well as, just growing myself. So and I was reading a book actually called Women Who Run with Wolves, which is an iconic book at this point. And one of the archetypes kind of that she brings up in the book is called Cantadora, storyteller, kind of a keeper of the ancient tale, so to speak. And I just loved that word. And so I went to look it up, and I could trademark it. And now I have it trademarked. And it was just a great way to encapsulate what I was trying to do, which was tell the story of these different women. And so Oliva Brion is also in that. So Oliva Brion, my current brand, I tell the story on each of the labels of a historical woman, mainly around the early 1900s. And I use Oliva Brion as kind of the figurehead character, and she is sort of living the life of all of these different true stories. And each of the labels is really inspired by the life of a real woman. And so I love storytelling to begin with. And I thought, I have all of these great stories of trailblazing women, like Annette Kellerman, an Olympic swimmer who was arrested for wearing a swimsuit of her own design, or Annie Chomsky, who rode a bike around the world for the first time and won a substantial sum of money for that. And then Effie Hotchkiss, who rode her motorcycle across the United States with her mom in the sidecar in 1915 when there was only dirt roads and it was 4,800 miles one way. And it was, just all these stories required a tremendous amount of grit and perseverance, and really interesting characters. And I thought those women exist today.
Yeah.
Those aren't just figures from history. There's really, really brave women alive today.
Yeah.
And I want to tell those stories. I want to meet them. I want to shine a light on that tale. And so I started one of the organizations that I had worked with as a volunteer when I lived in San Francisco was La Casa de las Madres, a domestic violence shelter in San Francisco. And so I had been giving my wine to them since I started making it for their annual gala. And I reached out to them and I said, I'd really like to start this brand. I'd like to give 1% of the proceeds of each of the wines to organizations that impact women and children. And I would love to continue to support La Casa. Is there maybe one of your founders or one of your people involved in the organization that might want to work with me? So then they hooked me up with one of their founders, Sonia Malera, who is an incredible woman who absolutely epitomizes all the things that I had in my head about the stories that I wanted to tell, that I hadn't seen her in her New York Times expose yet, And so it's just a way for me to shed light on these amazing organizations and incredible women that you can email and talk to now.
Accessible. So no, I love when you tell that story because you honor history, but they also exist today. You know? So Cantadora, is it going to be a Tempranillo? What are you going to go with the blend? What would it talk to us about that?
So Oliva Brion was founded with Pinot Noirs, mainly Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. And I've done some brand extensions for her. And I love Pinot Noir. It's a great that really challenges you as a winemaker. But I think my heart of hearts is Rhone varietals. I love Grenache, Syrah, Mourvedre, Tempranillo, even in the south of France, even though it's not an official Southern Rhone varietal. But I love Southern Rhone wines, like from Châteauneuf-du-Pape region of France. I just think they're so delicious and spicy and earthy and food friendly. And I'm just so inspired by the wines of that region. And I think California does a really great job producing those varietals. We have a great climate for them. They're actually very resistant to climate change as well in their own unique ways. They have different ways of handling heat and drought stress that are more efficient than other varietals like Pinot Noir, for instance. And so I think that it's just a great way to incorporate something that I really love in the wine world with Cantadora. So it's both the story and the grapes that I'm really passionate about.
Oh yeah, no, 100%. So let's go into some fun facts about Kira. You ready?
Okay.
The world is ending. What would be your last meal on earth, and what wine from Oliva Brion would you pair it with?
I don't know about my last meal. I love seafood. I love like a great salmon or sushi. So but the wine that I would choose wouldn't be my first pairing for it. So it's kind of funny, but I would probably eat some seafood because I love seafood. And then the wine that I'm really into right now is my Gsv Blend. It's a very Southern Rhone blend. It's predominantly Grenache, but it's so, just kind of rich and earthy right now. And I just tasted it last week and I'm just so into it. So right now I would definitely, if you were like, go grab one wine and grab some fish, or go grab a piece of the salmon and the wine and just drink it down.
No, I love that. So, fair enough. Last question. Thank you for being on the show. Last question. 3 people dead or alive that you would love to have dinner with and share your wine with. Who would those 3 be?
The 3 women that I would love to share my wine with.
Three people.
The first, it's just, I'm just gonna I don't know if it would be my final answer tomorrow, but I'm just gonna spitball the things that come up to my top of my head. One woman that I've been just enamored with over the past year after she, came on the national stage was Amanda Gorman. I'm absolutely anytime a poet brings national attention with that art form, I think it's just so beautiful. And I would love to hear what she's working on and see if she likes wine.
I like
So
that.
that's one that's on top of my head. Another one would be the what let me think. I mean, I like right now, I'm just so in love with the women that are on the Cantadora labels that
Cool.
I haven't been able to go out with Cynthia Tom yet. So she is on one of my Cantadora labels. Her organization is called A Place of Her Own. And she's an artist that's been recognized by the National Arts Guild, and she has a piece in the Smithsonian. And unfortunately, right now, she has some health problems that prevent her from traveling too far. And there is some optimism that those will be healed. And so I'm really looking forward to going out with her when she's feeling fully up to herself and, hearing more about her story. Right now, I've just been at her house. So Cynthia Tom is definitely a dinner I'm looking forward to. And, probably my mom. I don't get to go out with my mom on my own very much. My mom's husband has Alzheimer's, so she has to watch him a lot. And I have 2 little kids, and I have to spend a lot of time with them, which I love, but it's it's a lot of, I think both my mom and I have a lot of caregiving responsibilities right now. So I remember a few years ago, before my stepdad started to have health problems and before I had kids, I took my mom stayed with me for a night in San Francisco, and I took her to the opening of the San Francisco Symphony, and I took her to a really nice dinner. And that was probably the last time that my mom and I had this really, kind of bang out night together. So, and then my mom's favorite wine I make right now is Taquin. She's just in love with my white blend. So I would let her bathe in that if she wanted to.
Well, I love that. And you're so passionate about your winemaking. I've been with you where you bring your dolly, you're delivering, and we're doing business. And so ask you questions that you're not fully prepared to answer is pretty cool, right? Seafood and any wine, because you love fish, and then the 3 powerful people you love to have dinner with. So that's awesome, man. Well, thank you for being on the show. We're going to have you more often as we progress and changes and what's happening, because we really want our viewers to support you. So thank you again. And I can't wait to see you soon and pick up some more wine.
Good. Thank you. Pleasure to be on your show. Thanks, Armando.
Awesome. Talk to you soon.
Okay.